Some people in the comments have accused me of being too negative. I'm always destroying marketing hype and debunking audio myths. But then when I do actually speak enthusiastically about something, for example Reaper, I get accused of being a shill. Well, I guess I'm a shill then, because in today's video, I'm going to be telling you what I believe, in my opinion, is the best MIDI sequencer in the world. So I thought it'd be interesting to go over some of the sequencers which I've personally owned over the years, and I'll give some of my pros and cons to all of these briefly. Now, I first started making electronic music in a piece of software called Rebirth, not that long after it first came out. Now, at the time, this was an absolutely amazing bit of kit, basically a clone of a 909 and a 303. And after that, I started getting into Fruity Loops, and then Reason when version 1 first came out. That was absolutely great. And all of these bits of software were pretty much focused on step sequencers. Now, you had a piano roll in Reason, but you would use like redrum patterns and stuff like that. And step sequencers are great fun. They're not the most sophisticated and advanced tools in the world, but they're really, really fun and intuitive to use. But then after a while, I started thinking I want to upgrade to something more professional and serious. So I started getting into Cubase, and then I got into Logic. Version 5.5 was the version that I was on for quite a few years. And I absolutely loved this more advanced approach. And obviously, most of your work is going to be done in a piano roll type setting. And although that's much more advanced and you had much more fine-grained control over the sounds that you were making and the sequencing that you could do, it also lost a bit of fun in that more mature process. And then I discovered a piece of software called Renoise. Absolutely incredible piece of software. Now, this works a bit differently to your normal piano roll or step sequencer. This is a tracker style sequencer, and I was absolutely in love with this format. It's like reading the code in the Matrix. I really am enthusiastic about Renoise. What a great piece of software. But ultimately, I just got fed up sitting staring at a computer screen all day, and I didn't feel inspired anymore on the computer, and I wanted something hardware, a bit more fun, a bit more hands-on. So at the time, the main thing that people were talking about was the Octatrack. Now, I went out and bought one of those, and it was quite expensive, and I really wanted to get on with it, but I just didn't really like it that much. I didn't vibe with it. It just didn't feel intuitive enough. A lot of people really like that piece of kit, but for me, I wasn't vibing with it. So at some point, I got rid of that, and I got a BeatStep Pro. That was a really exciting thing that came out, but it was almost the polar opposite because it was so limited in what you could do. Instead of it being too complex, it was almost too simplistic. It just has like 2 melody tracks and 1 beat track. And although that was so limiting and there's not a lot you can do with it, it was actually way more inspiring because you could just jam with it and it was fun. And I made way more music with that BeatStep Pro. And although you're not really going to be making entire compositions with that thing, it was more sort of like a tool you could jam with, that you could get some stuff into your computer and then edit that and make some tracks more in the computer. But the front end of how you could be inspired was sort of prompted by the BeatStep Pro. So that was a really good workflow that I was using for a while. But then after that, I found it was a bit limiting and I was getting more into eurorack. So then I picked up an eloquencer, and I absolutely loved the eloquencer. What a great sequencer that is for eurorack. I kept the eloquencer around for a couple of years, and I did make a lot of music on it, and I really liked that thing. However, you feel a bit slowed down sometimes by the rotary encoder. It feels like you've just got this one rotary encoder that you have to do quite a lot of functions with. And once you've discovered the chants and the ratcheting, there's not that much more. It's not that deep. It's quite intuitive, but the trade-off is it doesn't go very deep. So then I started trying to expand that with some other eurorack stuff. So I got like the Varigate 8 Plus and a Make Noise Rene, and I was playing about with a IntelliGel Metropolis. The thing is, with these Eurorack based sequencers, they're really cool to have in your rack to get some CV and gate sources and stuff like that, but they're not really full featured, grown up, mature sequencers. They're just sort of tools in a way. They're really fun tools, but they're not really grown up, full featured sequencers. So at that point, I started looking at some other options, and I ran into the Hermod, which was still fairly new at that point when I bought the original version of it. And at first, just taking one look at it, you think, oh, well, it's not really going to be that hands-on because it doesn't really have that many knobs and stuff on it. It's just got like 8 buttons, and it didn't look that full-featured. And so at first I was kind of a bit skeptical, but I picked it up, and after I started using it for a while, especially in combination with the MIDI keyboard, I was just like, wow, this thing is absolutely amazing. Like, so I was really pleasantly surprised with the workflow of Hermod, and I used that to make a whole bunch of sketches for techno tracks, but my workflow was pretty much like I would make some sketches and some loops, and then take that over into the computer, record it in, and then arrange it there and edit it there, and do everything in computer. Just like I was using the BeatStep Pro to do, but a more advanced version of the BeatStep Pro. But I wanted something a bit more so I could stay in hardware longer before going over to the computer. So I looked at some other options, and at the time, a lot of people were talking about the Cirklon sequencer, and everyone was saying it's just amazing. It's the best thing ever, the best sequencer in the world. You've got to check this thing out. So I was going to give that a go. The thing is, you go and try and get one, and there's something ridiculous like a 3-year waiting list. and if you look at some videos online of reviews and stuff, it's more kind of people complaining about how complex and unintuitive it is to use and how it takes ages to do anything with it.
My biggest gripe with the Cirklon thus far is that it's just not fun.
So I can't really say too much about it because I haven't used one myself, but all of the videos I've seen of other people using it online, they're just sitting there doing stuff, taking ages to set stuff up, and it doesn't look fast, and I want to be fast and hands-on. It doesn't look like that, so I don't really think that would be something that I would personally enjoy using so much anyway. So I didn't get the Cirklon, but the company Squarp Instruments, who made Hermod, which I like so much, I like the workflow, the operating system, but I wanted something a bit more, a bigger sequencer. Well, they had just that. This is the Pyramid, which they made, which is absolutely incredible. It's got loads of silicon pads and encoders, and even this big XY pad where you can draw in automation, and it's got loads of I/O on it. You've got 2 MIDI out ports and 5 eurorack connections on it, and this was absolutely incredible. I was so happy with this, and I used this for years. I just absolutely didn't know how you could improve upon this design. It's pretty much perfection, as I thought. It's got the balance just right of the physical nature, intuitive nature of using a bit of kit, so you feel like you're actually playing an instrument, like a guitar or something. You're actually playing a physical instrument, and the screen is there, so you've got enough information, and the screen is sort of detailed enough so you can actually see what's going on, but it's small and sort of deliberately crap enough that you're not staring at a computer screen like what you're doing when you're sitting behind a computer. You don't feel like you're sitting behind a computer. You feel like you're using an actual piece of real hardware, like an instrument that you can play. And that balance was so important, and you got that so right. So I didn't know how they could make that any better. So is this the best MIDI sequencer in the world? No, it's not. There's something even better than this, and that is the new version of it called the Harpex. And this thing is just absolutely bonkers. The I/O for a start, there's 4 MIDI port outputs. There's 8 Eurorack type outputs, CV and gate. There's 2 Eurorack inputs, and you've got 2 MIDI inputs as well, and USB input and output. And the design is just absolutely phenomenal. I didn't understand how you could have improved the original Pyramid because that was so good already, but they've just improved it so much. The two are just like worlds apart. The 2 screens are really, really good on this because I didn't want so much screen because I didn't want to feel like I'm sitting in front of a computer. But you still don't feel like you're sitting in front of a computer with this because they're black and white. You feel like you're actually playing a real instrument. And then you've got this ridiculous amount of silicon pads here. So the intuitive, performative nature of this is just next level. A lot of people watching might not have a lot of hardware or any hardware at all. So you might ask the question, why do you want a hardware MIDI sequencer if you have no hardware to control with it? Well, you don't only control hardware with MIDI. You can also control stuff on the computer. Sure, you could make it much more complex and send weird MIDI parameters to max MSP and do all sorts of weird stuff like that and get really creative with it. But at the end of the day, you could literally just have a bunch of VST instruments and samplers set up in your DAW and just control it with this and have that in front of you as a hands-on, intuitive way of composing music and not have to stare at the screen. You can turn off the screen and work with a hardware sequencer and control the sound sources. But some people watching this might be thinking, well, what about the AKAI MPC series? Surely they're very good sequencers as well. And yes, they are. So the AKAI MPC 3000, which came out in 1994, is absolutely probably the most iconic and legendary sequencer of all time. Absolutely amazing. When that thing came out, it's like $4,500, and in today's money, that's like $10,000. Is a serious professional piece of kit, and the I/O on that thing is absolutely fantastic. It's not only a sequencer, it's also a sampler. So it's got 8 discrete jack outputs on the back, which you can route to a mixing console and mix down all of the sample-based stuff that you're doing. It's got, I think, 4 MIDI ports on the back. It was absolutely a beast when that came out, and it's just absolutely fantastic. I really highly rate the MPC 3000. However, it's now like over 30 years old, and the memory on it has got like a floppy disk with like 21 seconds of sampling time in mono at 44.1, 16-bit I think it is. And it was really cool at the time, but 30 years later, there's just incomparable what you can do with this from a sequencing point of view. But if you specifically want the sampling aspect, because this is just a pure MIDI sequencer, no sampling, we can just get something like the Bitbox, and now you've got sampling. And even Squarp instruments make a decent 4-channel sampler as well. So it's not that difficult nowadays just to get a standalone sampler, hook it up to that, and away you go. And the thing is, the MPC 3000 on the second-hand market costs about $4,000. So you can buy like 3 of these for the same price. If you look at what AKAI is doing now with their MPC series, they've basically just recreated a computer. You might as well just use a computer. It's just a big screen, and they've got like a DAW in there, but it's just sitting staring at a screen. Why you can stare at that screen, you can stare at that screen. What screen do you want to stare at? So to me personally, I don't know who in this day and age is going to buy an MPC 3000 over something like this. It's just technologically light years ahead. The things that you can do, it's just absolutely crazy. For example, like on this thing, you can do stuff that you just wouldn't think of or couldn't feasibly do with your standard DAW. For example, you can have each track independently with an independent tempo. So you can do like phase shifts between the tracks and like crazy stuff, like you can do ping pong. So you can play it this way and then it ping pongs back that way and then this way, or you can do it in like a random thing, and you can trigger this on the fly and all sorts of, and you can clock it externally. So, for example, you could have some sort of like slight LFO fluctuation with the BPM. Which, how can you do that on a standard modern DAW? You'd have to like draw like a waveform on like the BPM automation or something. But if you wanted to change that, it'd be like really awkward. And I don't even know how you do that in normal DAWs, like in Reaper or Cubase or Studio One. Like you can do things with this that you just can't do with standard DAWs. And even if you could do them, you wouldn't want to do them. But with this, you do want to do them because it's fun. And with a software-based DAW, you don't want to do it because it's laborious and annoying, and you're just going to be sitting staring at a computer screen for hours to do something that you could just do in like 2 minutes on this in a fun way. So that's why it's so powerful, because it's so inspiring and so quick and so flexible and so sort of out of the box. You're thinking out of the box. So not only does this do your normal CV gate MIDI signal output, you can of course also do more algorithmic sort of generative random chant stuff with it, really rich automation on the CV outputs or on MIDI parameters. But not only that, you can send out pure envelopes out of this. So what does that mean? So normally when you use a modular system, you send a trigger out to an envelope generator, and then from the envelope generator you go into whatever you want to control with that modulation signal. But you normally need an envelope generator to actually generate an envelope. Well, this can just generate envelopes straight out of it. And a lot of people, I don't even think a lot of people even know that, because what does that mean? It means something like stages. We don't need this anymore, because why do you need a bunch of envelope generator modules? You can just generate envelopes straight on this thing here. And something like voltage block. This was like an absolute weapon at creating really interesting, complex, sequenced modulation sources. But you don't need this anymore, because you can just do it as well with that thing. Even something a bit more exotic like this, you can do similar cool things with that. This is still really cool to have, but I mean, this does so much that it's like you can reduce the amount of modulation sources and envelope generators you have in your case, and instead have more interesting, fun oscillator modules in your case, which makes a more powerful system in a smaller space, and it costs less money. So in my personal opinion, this is the best MIDI sequencer currently available in the world. There's nothing that comes even close, and I'm not talking hardware based only, I'm talking hardware, software, whatever. DAWs, this is the best MIDI sequencer in my personal opinion in the world currently. So there you go, for all of the people who think I'm too negative, well, here's something I think is absolutely amazing. But of course, I've bigged up a lot of things on my channel: Reaper, Nova, Toucan plugins, Air Windows, VCV Rack, loads of things, and I'm going to continue making videos debunking myths and scams, and also bigging up the things that I think are fantastic.